Good evening and good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to tonight's Disability Tech Talk featuring Steve Ferreira, CEO and Executive Director of Beyond Disabilities, and Tyler Susko, Founder and Chief Technology Officer of Cadence. I'm Jocelyn Cohen, Vice President of Education with Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, or CPAR for short. This event is closed caption enabled, and I've turned on transcription. It's also being recorded, and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel soon. For additional accessibility, I'll share a visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with dark brown shoulder-length hair that's down and brown eyes. I'm wearing brown tortoiseshell glasses on a purple shirt. There's a CPARF-related background behind me that has white and different hues of green. Sometimes I may look like my eyes are looking away from the screen or like they're rolling, but that's part of my CP. In case this is your first online event with us, I'd like to tell you a bit about what CPARF does. Despite being the world's most common lifelong physical disability and affecting 18 million people worldwide, cerebral palsy is one of the most underfunded conditions. That's why CPARF funds research and technology that will positively change what it's like to live with cerebral palsy. On the scientific side, we're currently funding an array of projects that address cerebral palsy at all ages and stages of life. CPAR-funded research projects and fellowships focus on technology, chronic pain, adulthood, regenerative medicine, genomics, and early detection and early intervention. The discoveries that researchers make today will make a difference for millions of people with cerebral palsy soon and for generations to come. On the innovation front, we run Remarkable US, which is a US-based disability tech startup accelerator that's part of the Global Remarkable Accelerator program. And through seed funding, mentorships, deep dives, and support, we help startups bring affordable, life-changing technology one step closer to the people with disabilities who need it. Because the world isn't built for disabled people, but thankfully there are companies that place disability at the forefront, and Remarkable US is working with them. They're built to fill in gaps, meet crucial needs, and make accessibility accessible and affordable. We're also here to amplify other important disability-related developments that the community should know about, and that's why we're here right now. I've known both Steve and Tyler for years, and they've worked together on a project to make workouts more accessible for wheelchair users. Tonight, we'll discuss why workout accessibility is so important, what they created together, the path they took, and how they're moving forward now. Steve is a CPARF ambassador, the executive director of Beyond Disabilities, an organization that aims to educate the community and show that people with disabilities are capable of accomplishing many things. He is a motivational speaker who's passionate about physical fitness and working out. And Steve gave a TEDx talk in 2022. He's got more than 100,000 followers combined on Instagram and TikTok. So basically, he's a celebrity. Along with being the founder and chief technology officer of Cadence, Tyler is a lecturer and associate professor of teaching at UC Santa Barbara School of Engineering. I cannot wait for you to hear about their work. You can leave questions for them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. So welcome, Steve and Tyler. To kick things off, starting with Steve and then going to Tyler, can you each tell us a bit more about yourself and your backgrounds?
So I was born with cerebral palsy since the infant. I was adopted in Taipei, Taiwan. I started my motivational speaking career at the age of 15. My goal is to positively affect the other people with disabilities lives and motivate everyone, disabled or not. Beyond Disabilities was founded in November of 2011, and I love spreading awareness through groups to spread awareness.
That's awesome, Steve. I didn't realize you got started so early, but knowing you for all this time, I'm not surprised at all. Tyler?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Jocelyn. It's always great to be here. So I'm as Jocelyn said, I'm a professor at UC Santa Barbara. I teach mechanical design, like machines and products and things like that. I run a capstone program every year that allows our seniors to tackle real world problems. As part of that, I have 2 to 3 projects every year that are disabilities related. For a variety of reasons. One is because it's an area that I'm really interested in. So I did my PhD, finished in 2015 at MIT in rehabilitation robotics. And um, at the time I started out, I actually really wanted to go into CP and actually robots that interface with babies, which we're still doing at UCSB. But yeah, Steve has seen the machine. But every year we hold these different projects, and I found Steve through Jocelyn. That's a fun story. So Steve, like Jocelyn said, has a huge following on social media, and I was one of those. So I was like, he's a celebrity, and he came to Santa Barbara to do his TEDx talk, and I saw that, and then I said, oh, well, he is in Santa Barbara. Maybe Jocelyn can make a connection. So I reached out to Jocelyn, and she's like, yeah, I'll give you Steve's email after she asked Steve if it was okay. And then we connected. And, I see all of the social media stuff. So I saw all the exercise stuff, and it's an area that I like too. So I reached out to him and we just started talking. Hey, can we work together and try to do something that might be meaningful for a disabled community to work out in a public space. And that's something that both Steve and I were interested in. So we started working together. We've done 2 projects together now. 2 straight years of trying to come up with a accessible exercise project, and then we're starting a third here in another month.
I can't wait to go into the details about all of that. And, Tyler just mentioned Steve, you work out pretty frequently. And it's a big part of your life, I think. So what motivated you to work out in the first place, and what motivated you to do so at the gym?
So when I was a teenager, at the age of 12, my physical therapy turned into weight training, and reading some research, the best thing to do with cerebral palsy was to lift weights, and I haven't stopped. I work out 4 to 5 times a week, and if I'm frustrated, I'd rather take out my anger on weight
Hmm.
than the people I care about.
That's a good that's a good choice, and it's a good like coping mechanism with the stress of life and stress of the world. How long are your workouts usually?
They are typically 50 minutes per hour.
That's great. I do not do that, and I really should take a page out of your book. I have a feeling this conversation might motivate me to do so. Um, Steve, you're used to adapting to meet your needs. So, what are some adaptations that you commonly make that you think would be helpful for other wheelchair users who want to work out?
So for me, I had this talk with Tyler and Ryan, my buddy that's helping us on the project. For me, it's hard for me to look outside of the box because I've adapted so long, and it's like, what truly do other people in wheelchair wheelchairs need to be successful and independent while working out without feeling defeated? So I'm struggling, but I'm coming up with stuff, and I love creating a difference for all people in wheelchairs.
I appreciate that. And you touched on something that's really important and that I think keeps people with CP, whether they're wheelchair users, crutch users, walker users, or ambulatory, it may just keep us out of the gym or from working out. It's the idea of feeling defeated and you're doing it, whether it's because the machinery is not accessible, the actual place where the machinery isn't accessible, or the attitudes you might encounter when you go to the gym. So I appreciate that you really push past that. To work out for yourself and then really look forward for other people who use wheelchairs like you do. So you kind of touched on this, but based on your workouts, Steve, you realized there could be a better and more accessible way to get the strength training that you were seeking. And you and Tyler have both talked a little bit about this already tonight, that you've collaborated for a while. So during your first project, you worked together to create a machine that makes workouts more inclusive. So, Steve, can you share a little bit more about the beginning of this collaboration and how the idea started? Tyler kind of started us down the road, but can you take us further down the road of that?
So, as we mentioned before, you introduced us, Tyler and I had our meeting, and he gives me too much credit, but he said to me, what if we create a machine for people in wheelchairs? Because initially we wanted to do people with disabilities, but that's a very large spectrum to fulfill.
Yeah.
So since I'm a wheelchair user, we narrowed it down to wheelchairs. We tried to adapt a table machine to use in a row. I am notorious for breaking stuff. So thank goodness it was me and not a student on campus. And the best thing was we got it on video.
we got you breaking
Yeah.
the machine on video. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I see that Tyler is sharing his screen to show different parts
Steve.
of the machine. So
Yeah, I'm just sharing the screen so people have a little understanding of what was done that first year. This is the first year, Steve.
Yeah.
okay. So is this your modification that's
Yeah,
in the pulley
so
carriage?
we wanted the height to be motorized so it would be easier than me standing on my wheelchair. And Tyler's seen me stand on my wheelchair, and it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
So the problem with this design was, Tyler, do you want to chime in?
Sure. Yeah. So this was, the first one. So this was a electronic thing. There's a motor down here that spun a screw. The screw would move this thing up and down. The other thing that we did to it is move the weight stack up. So for wheelchair users, it was hard for Steve and others to access the pin if it was too far down because it's like near the ground. So we just moved the weight stack up by 8 inches. There was an attempt by students to come up with a way to pull a pin out with limited dexterity, because that was a challenge that Steve had presented. So there's a rail here where there's a slider where this pin would slide up and down. In theory, it was good. Didn't work too well, right, Steve?
Yeah.
And then Yeah, so the idea was there was a button panel that I guess it wasn't installed in these pictures, but you press a button and it would move this cable assembly up to where you would want to grab it. So one of the problems that Steve had brought up at the beginning was, hey, they go to the gym, he goes to the gym, but this pulley thing is so high he can't get there. So he can't now use it. So that's a problem. And then even if he could use it, he'd have to grab a pin that was up there that was hard from a dexterity point of view, then remove the pin and control it as it was moving down. So the first year's effort was, hey, let's get a functional trainer and modify it so that with a push of a button, it could go to the height that was useful for Steve to use it. But we learned some things. For
Yeah,
this
we
one, yeah. For this one, it was we had to make it, it was pretty slow. Um, Also the access to pins or sorry to outlets, power outlets in gyms was hard sometimes. So we tried to think about in year two, how do we make this? I can share year two. Steve, we can bring that up. So let's look at year two. So this is what the one that just completed.
on my file. Oh my god.
Mm.
Sorry,
So where's the pictures on this one? Oh no,
I
that's
have no idea.
here. Well, there's a poster. Maybe we can see it there. So this is the newer one, and
Oh.
instead of having it motorized, there's a crank assembly. So instead of a motor where you have to plug it into the wall, we tried a wheel that could be rotated with an accessible knob here.
Yeah, I see.
Um,
Like a
yeah,
wire
and
knob that
there's
people can grab.
Yeah.
yeah, so you could grab this and rotate it. And then it had a winch on it, the cable wrapped around. So the cool thing about this design is wherever you left it, it just stuck there. So there was no need for a pin. The cable itself would self-lock on the winch.
Oh, that's great.
Much like, yeah. But the downside with this one is we found out that all the weight of the pulley device that's moving up and down would require you, even if everything was perfect, to have like 5 pounds of rotation, and you'd have to rotate it about 9 times, right, Steve, to get it from the
Yeah.
bottom to the top. So this could be exhausting for certain people.
I
So
mean,
we were
that's
like,
its own workout.
yeah. So then we're
I
like,
would say that, yeah.
the other big challenge, and I think we'll get there at some point, is Steve and I had this discussion, I don't know, over maybe 3 or 4 meetings this summer, about where are we going with all of this stuff. So these are student projects that um, in order to really make a difference, it's not just about making a poster. We think that there's value there in terms of just spreading awareness and getting people on board with, hey, we need to make spaces accessible to people. And inclusion is really important, especially with people that have limitations, that they're able to use spaces that everyone else is. But there's a really long road to creating something like this and
Yeah.
getting it into an actual facility. So, in order to do this, we would have had to convince exercise fitness equipment manufacturer that this is a worthwhile adaptation to make to a device. And then we'd have to convince gyms that, hey, this is a worthwhile adaptation to bring into your gym. So this summer, Steve and I, over many discussions, have decided, what if we stop trying to make a machine that's going to be accessible? And why don't we focus on creating a tool to make machines that already exist more accessible to people? And so that's where the future is going to take us.
So
Yeah.
unlocking accessibility a bit. I mean, that path just sounds like a typical CP related path. I kind of joke that my like CP shapes the way that I see the world, in the sense that like you fall down, you literally have to get back up. You have to go around things and deal with obstacles and, change your course, change your path, change your goal just based on what you encounter. And it seems like that's what you landed on here. And before we talk more about what you're working on for the future project that you just mentioned, what was the process like for those two original machines, as far as were other folks who are wheelchair users consulted? Was their feedback incorporated? Maybe start with Steve and then go to Tyler to add anything else.
So, going into this project, I had two wonderful teams, but I don't think the students realize how ambitious building fitness equipment was,
Mm.
but they thought it was a cool idea, cool concept, and last year we got two people in wheelchairs involved in this project so they would help me do testing if need be, because I'm always in Washington. What do I do? Not my fingers. Oh, I'm in California now.
So, you know, teleportation is actually the accessibility that we need. Let's be real.
Yeah,
That's really what we need to figure out. So that makes sense too. They were local to Santa Barbara to test
yeah.
it out. And then was there any feedback that surprised you, or anything that was especially helpful that those two folks shared?
I so to me, they only participated when they could because they were taking classes of their own,
Okay.
but they really liked the wheel mechanism because essentially it's like how you adapt a car for a person in a wheelchair,
Right.
but the gearbox was too unstable and it was just too much force, and by the time I was ready to test the machine, I was just exhausted.
Oh, right. You
So
were doing the workout before the workout, like we were saying.
yeah.
I was thinking it did look like, because I've seen adapted steering wheels, and I was thinking that, and so I'm glad you brought that up, that the knob looks like just how you'd steer a wheel.
Yeah.
And you know, we've gone into this a little bit, and this will sort of, you know, bring us to the next part of the conversation, that creation and exploration of ideas are both so important, and it's how we solve challenges and uncover new ones, like we were talking about. So, Tyler, you mentioned some challenges that we faced, and Steve mentioned some too. Like, were there any other things you'd want to share about things you encounter, challenges you encountered when you were creating the machines and you had different versions of them? And then also, like in the wider landscape, anything else you didn't yet touch on that was a challenge for this?
Yeah, sure. So, anytime you're dealing with a disability and it's hard to think about, who are you trying to actually serve? So when we started this was something that Steve and I had discussed, who are we serving? So you can't just say we're serving everybody with a disability because there's so many different types and
Billion people in the world with a disability.
exactly, exactly. So eventually we whittled it down to wheelchair users. So it's a broad group that's going to have different abilities. So in terms of challenges, then you have to think about what can all of those different groups do. So the people that we had working with us this year, including Steve, were a couple of students at UCSB with different reasons they were in wheelchairs. So one was spinal cord injury. So upper extremity was uninfected. So, dexterity was not a problem. So things that we needed to solve for Steve were not necessarily things that we needed to solve for that individual. Another individual had a much different chair that was amazing and could be on two
Yeah.
wheels the whole time. And so that his tech was amazing. And
Oh my goodness. Like
so
a standing wheelchair, like one of the
oh,
ones that
it was
rises up.
amazing. No, this he was a UCSB engineering student, and this guy was good. He built this thing himself out of like a Segway and then
Yeah.
a hydraulic jack that raised it up. I mean, this guy should be teaching the classes. He was excellent. So he had this kind of, but it was a different constraint, right? So like we learned that we needed to develop something that's going, you always have to, whenever you come up with an engineering problem, it's what I teach here, is effectively you have to bound the problem some way. Like we can't do every disability. Like how are we bounding it? And then even within the bounds of a wheelchair, we had to think about like where are we? That so we would come up with things like, okay, well, we're going to do it for a standard wheelchair, not necessarily with all the bells and whistles, because not everybody will have that. And then, we want to tackle the dexterity concerns because really, Steve is our golden standard here, and we wanted to make sure that it was something that was designed for him.
Right.
But ultimately, we came to the conclusion that our best way to impact the world here is to come up with something that makes the world accessible rather than to change the world in this particular sense. You can change the world, I think. However, it's going to be a heck of a lot of effort.
Well, and making something accessible does change the world. It just does it in a smaller, more manageable increment. And then
Yes.
you have to, contend with all the factors you were talking about
Yeah.
gyms, attitudes at gyms, all of the factors that would
Yes.
require you to get, that you need to meet in order to get machines into the gyms. Someone actually asked in the Q&A if you had to go through regulatory approval for the devices, and I don't think you got to that point. Is that right? Like it's one of the things that maybe you stopped and thought about and said maybe this particular avenue isn't the one we want to go down.
Yeah, so we actually, the second year, the first year we didn't. The second year we actually followed all ASTM standards, which would be the regulation body behind exercise equipment. So there's standards that we have access to at UCSB. So that tells you what type of loads it needs to be able to stand up to. And essentially what we did is we reduced the number of weight plates that were on the machine so that we could ensure that it was actually safe for commercial gym use. So we actually did follow the standards here. It was just an uphill battle to continue with this would have been possible, but someone would have had to want to do this as their life's work.
Right, sure. And this other person, I mean, the same person had another question, sorry. And they asked, what advice do you have for innovators who want to introduce new mobility or accessibility products to the market from a regulatory perspective? And, you have a certain amount of experience with that, and I'll let you share that. But I'd also encourage the person who asked this question to make sure that they come to our disability tech talks later on this year and in the beginning of next year that will speak with the startups who are in our startup accelerator, because they have varying degrees of experience with different agencies and things like that. So if there's other aspects of this part of your experience that you want to share, feel free to do that though.
Yeah, I can talk to that. So, well, I guess I can share my experience. So this is our Cadence shoe. So talking about mobility devices and regulation. So this was something that we just launched, started shipping about 5 months ago. So this is a mobility device for people with any type of disability that makes it hard to advance gait during the swing phase of walking. So if you think about walking, got stance phase when your foot's in contact with the ground, swing phase when the foot's moving forward. So this shoe is made to have a low friction surface when you're bringing it forward so you can slide over the ground in case ground clearance is a problem. And then you put your foot down on it and you get your traction back. The reason I bring this up is we're going through this whole process right now with Cadence. Currently this is a shoe. So it depends on what type of mobility device we're talking about. If it's a durable medical equipment type thing and you're seeking like insurance coverage, you're going to have to go through FDA, and then you're going to have to figure out how it's going to be coded and then figure out the whole insurance pathway. With our shoe, we're making it as a shoe to start. And shoes are not FDA regulated. Shoes are just shoes. So we don't have to go through any type of regulation process. That being said, you always want to think through what are best practices with whatever it is you're developing. So for us, it's been nice. We've been working with a certain retailer who we expect to be with and they had really high standards, especially for footwear. So they put us through all their standards, which were material testing to make sure it was free of chemicals and that it withstood certain abrasions and things of that nature. That we went through with this shoe, which was really good in an exercise. And we're currently just starting to get into the FDA. We're registering very shortly with the FDA, and we're trying to get into the insurance pathway. But that's a whole nother thing in itself. So
Yeah.
I've seen this model a couple times with different companies, even publicly traded companies, big public companies that supply medical type goods. You don't have to go through insurance. That's kind of something that everybody thinks. That pathway is very long, and it's unlikely that you get there unless you have a whole lot of money.
Right.
Um, yeah,
All
so
about like
starting e-commerce is a good way.
it's all about, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier and where I want to take the discussion now. Also, it's again finding an alternative pathway. Because if you were originally thinking of something as a medical device, or you're originally thinking of something that needed to meet different regulations for gyms, and then it's just too hard. There's too much red tape, there's too many barriers, you have to pivot. And that's something that in disability life, like we were talking about, is relatively frequent. So you kind of alluded to this, is that the machine that you started working on, does it make sense to move forward in a bigger, more mass produced way, creating all those relationships with gyms, and that you wanted to create something else that would help make existing machinery more accessible? So Steve, if you have more thoughts you want to share on where that's headed, I don't know like how early you are in the process, but I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So I just first off, I just find it ridiculous that gyms aren't accessible already, because everyone who works out, they adapt their workout. So why aren't people in wheelchairs given a equal opportunity to be fit? But the tools that we talked about will we we are starting off with 3 components for now, to not to make it too complex. So one will be something to help grip a pin. One will help you lower and raise the machine height. And one of the tools will be a hook to not only help you with grabbing whatever, but that hook could also help you open doors or anything. And we want this multi-tool to fit in a gym bag.
That makes sense, because you don't want something that's too cumbersome for people when they're already bringing something with them to the gym.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Tyler, did you have anything to add there?
Well, that was some education to me too, because we had discussed it, but I hadn't figured out what Steve had decided upon for the future. So
Live
that was
reveal. There
great.
you go.
Yeah, it was all revealed right there. So
My bad.
no, it's good. It's good. I was waiting for that. I was waiting on your 2-page description. That's how we do things. People send us 2-page descriptions, and then I send it out to the students, and they get to choose what they work on. So
Okay.
that'll be a fun 2-page description to read.
I mean, it makes sense that you see it from all of these different angles and that you're trying to solve it in a multitude of ways. Because people have different needs, like we were talking about, depending on what their disability or what their injury is, it's going to affect what parts of their body are strongest, most flexible, most able to, use whatever tools you create. So I'm excited to see where this goes for sure. And what would you say success looks like for you with the projects that you're working on, whether it's this one or if there's any other ones that we haven't touched on yet today that you're working on together? What would you deem it? What would make you deem it a success? Steve and then Tyler for that one.
Go ahead.
Dawson said it was your turn first.
No comment.
No
Okay.
comment. You're passing it to me.
Okay, you can pass the mic. That's okay.
I honestly think that for this to be successful, the project description has to be well planned out in as many details as possible. And I and the other two people in wheelchairs have to be engaged with the students of my team to make sure that they need the support they need and they don't overthink something so simple,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It's really easy to overthink anything. So
Yeah.
the simplest, easiest path that gets the job done is sometimes the best one.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Oh, thanks,
Your
Steve.
turn.
Yeah, so I think I thought a lot about this, and we've actually, Steve and I have talked about it. What are we doing with all this stuff? We're doing lots of projects, but what are we actually doing here? And Steve's mission, we've talked about his mission and how we can best serve it. And it's right behind him, accomplish your goals. And I think it's fostering accessibility and just inclusion. And there's multiple different ways that we can do that. So I think at a minimum, doing these projects and posting about them, I think might have the chance of empowering others to say, like, do what Steve did. Steve had a need and he went and engaged with other people and worked with other people. And, that is an avenue for everyone. And I think, one of the cool things that I found about Steve is his willingness to post and build this social following, which I think inspires a ton of people, either people with disabilities or without. Like, dang, this guy's out there getting it. And I think it's cool to see what you can do and what Steve's able to do and push through all these challenges. Everybody, disability, no disability, whatever, everybody has challenges that they need to push through. Everybody has a disability. That's what Steve taught me. He said everybody has a disability of some sort. And pushing through that is something I think that's just a common link to humanity. So I think in doing these projects, just showing people that, hey, no matter what your situation is, you can work with other people to solve things. I think that in general, that's what we're doing. But, the next step of success that I see with this, I would love it. And this is with all my projects that I advise here at UCSB. I'd love to see them take legs and become something that exists out in the world that makes the world a better place. So it would be cool if whatever output comes from Steve's project next year, if we could find a path to actually make it available to others. So if we could come up with a tool, makes it easier, like Steve said, to open doors, to grab pins, to adjust weight systems so that others could go and exercise and find the joy in it that Steve had. That would be the ultimate level of a success in my eyes. There's more to do there to get to that point. You'd have to figure out how to manufacture it, how to sell it, how to market it to people that were interested to actually get this thing. It's challenging because, as you know, Jocelyn, when you're making devices for a population that has a specific disability, your market size is quite small. So then it's hard to provide a business case behind that for investment to go ahead and pay for tooling that's required to create parts and such like that. So
Yeah, I mean, one other thing, well, two things. One is, really talking about finding people to be on your team and help you solve problems. I like to say that there's a lot of focus in the disability space from certain angles about being independent, but I think that interdependence is the sweet spot because no one is truly independent, nor should you really want to be. Like, we all are going through this life and moving through this world together, and the more people we have on our side helping us solve our problems, the better. And then the other thing I'm thinking about is like, thinking of these tools from a disability angle or for disabled people, but there are people who are temporarily disabled by injuries and things like that, and they may still want to go to the gym, and tools like this would be helpful for them. And it's all about perspective too. Like, people don't think about that most people will become disabled. If they're lucky to live long enough, they will likely become disabled. It's the only kind of group you can join at any time. And so having these tools out there is really the curb cut effect, where those curb cuts were created for wheelchair users, but anyone walking through a city with any wheeled item, a stroller, a cart, piece of luggage, takes advantage of that. So I feel like there are definite ways, like, you're looking at these potential tools right now through a specific lens, but I feel like there are probably adjacent lenses where these pieces could also be helpful for folks. So I'm really excited to see where this goes. I love your energy, both of you. I've always appreciated how you approach things and that, like, the attitude that you bring to everything. I see a few comments in the Q&A, so I want to make sure that I just get to those and shout them out. Marilyn said, excellent point about accessible gyms and tailoring equipment to specific issues and abilities that each individual has. Marilyn said the HER strength training equipment, which I'm not sure I know what that is, but maybe Steve knows. The HER strength training equipment makes wheelchair accessible strength training. And Marilyn's very excited to learn more. And also shared that it's SMA, so Spinal Muscular Atrophy Month, and the motto for that group is life takes muscle, and that's a powerful statement, and I feel like that really does apply here. So there's another comment in the Q&A from Meredith, who says she's an athlete born with CP who uses a power chair, and she's been in ski racing for 11 years and started adaptive CrossFit a couple of years ago. She really wants to get more involved and figure out what she can do to help other people with CP believe that they can be athletes, and she would love to connect with you to discuss further and figure out any way that she can help. So to that point, if people want to learn more about the products and projects that you're working on together, like what the next steps are, where you are, how they can help, what's the best way that they can do that? Tyler, maybe?
I was gonna say Steve.
I was like, I don't think Steve wants this one. I'll
Well,
give it to Tyler.
Well, I think you're welcome to email me, but Steve is really directing this project here. So Steve would be a good I think we're always looking for people that are interested, and especially people that might make use of whatever it is that Steve conceives here. So having more input is better than less. So if we're thinking about making tools that make a fitness center more accessible, it'd be great to hear what are the common problems that exist for everybody. So that would be awesome. So sending those kind of comments to both of us, Steve and myself, would be great. That's something that I challenged Steve with this summer. Like, when you walk into a fitness facility, what are the biggest problems for you? And let's think about what those problems are, and then our job, or my student's job, is going to be come up with a solution to those problems. So if you have ideas or thoughts of what makes it hard for you to exercise in a gym, if you just copy both of us on an email, we can include it in next year's project.
Yeah, the other piece of it, Steve, like we both alluded to, you're sort of an internet celebrity in the disability space. Where can people find you online on your platforms? Like, what's your username there?
So my username is no excuses Steve on Instagram.
Okay.
So can I mention one other thing?
Absolutely.
So earlier I launched my second series called Build It with Steve Ferreira, and the purpose of that series is to teach other people with disabilities how to adapt their workouts without feeling defeated.
I love that. So I hope that people follow you on Instagram and any other channels they can find you on. And I would say, is Instagram the best way to reach you? Like in a DM, a direct message, or if not, I'm
Um,
happy to share whatever contact information afterwards with folks that registered for this webinar.
my email is on my Instagram page.
Okay.
I do not open DMs because my Instagram went viral for the third time in 1 year.
I mean, that's a great achievement, and I can understand why you would not touch your direct messages.
Yeah.
That's a smart move. So everybody check out No Excuses Steve on Instagram, and email him at the email address on his profile. I just want to thank both of you for joining us tonight, sharing the journey that you've taken from meeting each other, brainstorming through different ideas and different needs for people with CP and other disabilities, to get moving more and working out more. And I want to thank everybody for joining us and staying with us tonight. It's a busy time at CPARF. So if anyone here is interested in raising funds to support CP research and the innovative disability related technology, we'd love for you to participate in September. You can sign up at september.us and create a team of up to 4 people. And if you want to pair your fundraising with physical activity, there are up to 80 activities you can do, including adaptive workouts like what we discussed tonight, yoga and dancing in your wheelchair, and all of those things convert to steps. And I would just want to add that someone had asked in the Q&A, they had said they're a parent of a child with CP who wants to connect with other parents to share their experiences. One thing I would suggest is checking out CPRN. It's our strategic partner, and they also have forums called MyCP once you sign up. And that's a way that you can connect with both other parents of kids with CP and adults with CP who've been through it and can share some of our cumulative lifelong experience. So our next webinar is coming up in September. So make sure you're on our email list and following us on socials. That's Research for CP, that's FORCP, to learn more about the next webinar that we're doing and how we're bringing science and technology to life to change what's possible and make accessibility accessible. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and night, depending on day or night, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you again all for joining us. Have a great one.